The Compliance Perspectives podcast is sponsored by Athena, customizable compliance training, an employee hotline, and case management all in one tool. Welcome to the Compliance Perspectives podcast. I'm Adam Turteltaub from the Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics and Healthcare Compliance Association. Joining us today from Silicon Valley is Glenn Sweatt. Glenn is a vice president at ECC, which, for those not familiar with it, is a construction, environmental, and disaster response firm that's a federal contractor. They've been working on disaster remediation after the fires here in Los Angeles, which actually is where I am based. So this is a conversation that's really close to home. And today we're going to be talking about the challenges in terms of managing compliance in the aftermath of a large disaster. Glenn, thanks for taking time out of your day to talk to us. And first, I guess really the first question is sort of what I just said. So what are some of the unique challenges to managing compliance in these kinds of situations?
Sure, Adam, and thank you for having me. It's good to be here. I mean, I think that, the biggest issue is, unlike compliance programs in what I would call a static environment, when you come in after a disaster, you've got a very large, potentially, and certainly in this case, a very large scale project in a very dynamic environment. A lot of moving pieces, a lot of new people, a lot of new stakeholders. So you've got to take all of your plans and be able to implement them into the field to a lot of new people. And scale them in a way that people can kind of quickly understand them and that they're going to work. So in addition, we've got a lot of different stakeholders, right? So even your normal compliance plans may have to be quickly adapted. You've got not just the government client that you normally work with, but you're going to have community politicians and environmental groups and the residents who live there and the residents who have had to move out, but still have a vested interest in their neighborhoods. You've got people who aren't directly in the area of the fires, but who are still going to be impacted. So, for example, all the additional trucks and traffic that are going to hit the areas going to the landfill. Additionally, as you mentioned, we are a federal government contractor, so we've got a great deal of heightened compliance to begin with that you wouldn't see, if you just, contracted with a commercial contractor to come clean up your house after an event. When you're working for the federal government, we've got everything from specific wage and hour paradigms, environmental issues, issues that govern our transportation and disposal. We've got our small business rules, our local hiring goals, all of that. So it's a very multifaceted, approach to be compliant. And this is, we've done a lot of these in the past, but this is the largest fire that anybody's ever dealt with, not just us, but it's the largest debris removal project in the country's history. So you've got to do it in a way that's, first and foremost, it's safe. Secondly, it's fast. And then we also say, we do it compliant and in a way that's, got a constant emphasis of empathy for the homeowners, because you're not just dealing with executing a project, but you're also dealing with, 10,000 people who are going through a very, very difficult time in their lives.
That is a lot. So what are some of the specific challenges for the Los Angeles fire compared to past disaster responses? I mean, you mentioned it's the largest fire ever. Are there other unique challenges that come with it?
Yeah, I think every disaster has its own personality, if you will. They're all different because the cities are different, right? People are different, the size and density of demographics, the traffic patterns. Of course, LA is famous for its traffic. And, when you put 1,000 extra trucks on the road, that's going to be an issue, right? So the types of neighborhoods, that affects everything from the types of environmental issues that we might see. The communities themselves, they're all different. Lahaina is different than Northern California, then it's different than Southern California. Even frankly, the Palisades communities and the Eaton communities are different. They just have different interests and different, things that are important to them. It also, neighborhood by neighborhood and location by location depends on, the effective resources. Are you going to be able to get subcontractors, enough equipment, enough landfill space, that's permitted both for the quality and quantity of debris that you have to move away? I mean, I think one of the things about Los Angeles, and we finished this job in record time, and that is a reflection of, both the, fantastic client and the politicians there who really removed a lot of roadblocks to get it done quickly, but also because you have so many resources. It's a city with, millions and millions of people, but we were able to get it staffed up and resourced very, very quickly. Every city also, some of the other challenges, language is certainly one. We kind of figured that, if we had all of the compliance materials rolled out and all the training done in English and Spanish, that we would be fine. I think as we went through the project, we realized that we probably had to expand that into a few more languages to make sure that we were getting, the communication of the compliance program to all of the truckers, to all of the operators, because Spanish and English might not have been their primary language. Again, other differences on different cities and locations where disasters happen. Part of the workforce depends, other things that we have to do for compliance. So wage and hour is a big one. In California, you've got not only the federal government wage and hour compliance issues that we have to deal with, but California has its own very specific and in some cases overlapping wage and hour issues. So making sure that we and all of our subcontractors are complying with those is something that you need to take care of. Uh, Disaster locations also, every place is going to have its different environmental challenges. So air, water, trees, traffic, all of that kind of differs, I think, from location to location. And also just the knowledge base of the community. I think one of the things that we, as we're rolling out our compliance programs and just the execution of the job in general, information is critical out to all of the stakeholders, all of the homeowners, because misinformation is really harmful kind of on both ends of the spectrum. Some people, if they don't appreciate the risks of what's out there in their lot or what's out there in the neighborhoods, they can put themselves in harm's way. And then on the other side of that spectrum, though, you have a lot of people who get a lot of misinformation on the internet, and that can really create a lot of confusion and inefficiency when you're trying to tackle the execution of the project. So I think those are the big issues. Like I said, just the neighborhoods are different. The age of the architecture of the homes is different. How densely packed the neighborhoods are. All of that, drives different issues with environmental compliance. One thing here's just kind of an interesting example that we hadn't seen before. The number of EV batteries that we saw in this disaster, was significantly different than we would have seen certainly in a fire 10 years ago. But I think also in LA, it was kind of a lot higher than we have seen in a lot of other cities. So those are the types of things that I think on any storm or any fire, any disaster response that you just have to kind of gauge the city that you're going to be working in and kind of figure out all of those things and adapt to them on a day-to-day basis as you move through the operation.
That's a lot to think about. And on the EV battery front, yeah, it's funny. Living here, you would think fully 30 or 40% of Americans drive electric vehicles because there's so many on the road, but that's not typical. And also not typical, as you're talking about resources, obviously there's a big difference between what's on the island of Maui versus Los Angeles. During the fires, when they were talking about the potential economic damage, they pointed out it was actually relatively small given just how enormous the economy of Los Angeles is. I think I read that Los Angeles County's economy is bigger, or GDP is bigger than all of Switzerland's. It's just extraordinary. So you talked about the language issues, and there are a lot of languages spoken here. How do you facilitate training and communication to such a large number of new participants in your efforts in a short period of time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think you have to lean in and really be intentional with what you're doing. And when we talk about language, I mean, it's kind of funny, but there's really several different things. One is, making sure that we're rolling out in English or Spanish or whatever language we need to communicate the information, but also the compliance language. I mean, most of these truckers, if they have not done federal government work before, we're going to be telling them things that they have to do that they may not even understand, right? So just explaining acronyms and vernacular that are specific to the federal government, that in and of itself is also a language issue. But one of the things that we did is, in addition to publishing everything in dual languages, we used a lot of technology. So a lot of QR codes that people would then, pull up plans, guidance, even our hotline cards, all of that is in dual language. All of it is accessible through QR codes that we would then put on little business cards, and then we would pass those out in the field. We would hand those out at the landfills to make sure everybody had them. So that would drive a lot of potential traffic to the hotline if people had issues, but also just a lot of operational things. One of the things with a job like this is there are changes every single day, right? So you might start out doing something, and then because of traffic or homeowners or whatever the case may be, the Corps of Engineers may say, hey, we need to pivot and do it a different way. So then we have to, tell 2 or 3,000 people, hey, the way we did it yesterday is a little bit different. And so multiple daily meetings. You've got a plan of the day meeting in the morning. You've got a plan of the day meeting in the at the end of the day, and pushing all that information down. On-site translators at those meetings. Basically having those safety meetings interpreted and translated in real time. You've just got to be very specific and, like I said, intentional about it. And then as far as the compliance, the other thing that we did is early on, we knew we had a number of subcontractors who maybe hadn't necessarily done federal government work before. So I would say within the first few weeks of this effort, we rolled out several webinars that we gave. Wage and hour is a specific one where we kind of specifically told people, look, here are the Service Contract Act requirements under this project. Here are the rates. Here's the wage determination. Here's what Department of Labor will look for. Here's what you need to do. Here's your pitfalls. Here's what the California rules are. Sometimes they overlap. And here's what you do in case of conflict. And, we need to make sure that everybody's getting paid the right amounts, the right benefits, and they're getting paid promptly, et cetera. So, like I said, there's, you just got a ton of new people, and it's just, the proverbial drinking from a fire hose. You've got to do it quickly, and you've got to do it every single day. The other thing is, even with the number of people, there's also a lot of turnover on projects like this. So the people that you train in February may not be the people that are there in March. So, kind of not only doing it, but then also redoing it, refreshing it, and just constantly beating the drum of compliance is really the only way that you can kind of, maximize your chances of being compliant.
I don't even know where to start. I mean, it's amazing what you did and how quickly, and some of the challenges. Any other best practices you want to share as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think, there's certain things that, companies that operate in this field have probably learned over time. And I think maybe just as a government contractor in general, one of the biggest for us, I think, is avoiding the lower tier subcontracting. When we subcontract to a company, we can train them, educate them, and keep our eyes on them. If we allow them to then subcontract further to a company who then potentially subcontracts further, the further away you get from the government who runs everything and is in charge of oversight, or the further you get away from us as the prime contractor, I think the greater your chance of having some non-compliance, right? You've got just less due diligence on who's on the job, more chance that things that may need to be flowed down in the contract are not flowed down. It's just more of a game of telephone, right? So if I tell you to, here's the way you have to do things to be compliant, if that's got to go through 4 different people before it gets to the bottom line, then you just kind of run your chances of non-compliance up. Like I said, I think that's where technology really helped us in this particular one. Daily meetings, a lot of QR codes. Everybody's out there in the field with their phones, able to quickly pull up the plans. If they're not sure about how to do something right, there's also a ton of government oversight. That's also you can't overlook that or fail to appreciate or mention it. But out in the field, there's hundreds of people that you can go get clarification from to make sure that you're doing things right, pretty much as you go through. So I think those are the big things, but it really, at the end, not to be too cliche, it's a team effort, right? You can't have one person in charge of compliance on a job like this. You've got to have, everybody really bought into it.
Most definitely. Well, Glenn, thank you for your work to clean up my city. I want to thank you also for sharing your insights with us today. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen. I'm Adam Turteltaub from SCCE and HCCA. I hope we're able to expand your compliance perspective.